This is the Internet Court of Truth and Lies, and its purpose is if you've got something that you think is a lie in the media, you think that something is the truth in the media, then you can bring it to 8 jurors to dissect the lie or the truth with 8 verdict questions, which is a way to keep the dialogue on the question of whether or not something is true or a lie focused. You see that you, as the plaintiff who brings the case, sees how other people think about things, which may not be the way you think about things. And everybody sees different ways to view what the plaintiff thinks is a lie or the truth. And it stays on topic because of those 8 verdict questions. The questions are never perfect. They're universal for all the cases. Their purpose is to keep discussion focused and give us a way to not just somebody start blurting stuff out like social media does all the time. This case is a retry of a case called Stealing Your Agency, which was done about a year ago, where we were unable to record the case for technical reasons. So we wanted to run the case again. And of course, the world has changed in the year, and there's a lot more going on in terms of people in the media stealing other people's agency. The basic case is described here in this.
I'm stealing your agency. The Mendaciology of trust. How can someone else make you believe things that are lies? How can we prevent ourselves from being misled?
That's the definition of stealing your agency, is making you believe this thing, that something is true that isn't, or that something is a lie that isn't, and causing you to actually do things that you would not normally do. There was a book by a guy named Christopher Wiley that where at the end of the book, he suggested that a fundamental right that everyone should have that's protected by government. Now, right now, this is not protected by government, but a fundamental right that should be protected by any government would be the right to your own agency. Just like the right, you have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The government's job is to protect your life, your liberty, and which is your ability to do unexpected things, and the pursuit of happiness, your ability to make money and live happily. You should also have your right to your own agency, which basically means that if somebody steals your agency, that should be illegal. And the government should protect that. What we've seen with the internet is people actively going out and using the internet as ways to manipulate people into doing things and believing things that are not true or that are misleading. What we want to do in this case is show you a couple of 3 things that are new, that have just come out, and that add to this article I'm showing you right now. There's an editor in the MIT Technology Review named Will Douglas Heaven. In this particular copy, there's a new article by him called The New Biologists, where he writes about studying AI LLMs as if they're a new organism. And what he looks at is he looks at the ability of LLMs to manipulate other people's agency, and also to do things like cough up the truth. If the LLM is intentionally manipulating your agency, you can get it to be honest and to admit that it's been conniving you and trying to get you to do something that you didn't normally want to do. It turns out that Will Heaven has published several articles, and there's one that's available. The one that I'm looking at, I can't show you because it's in the current issue and there is no link online at all to it. But what he does in this particular article is he gives you examples where LLMs have been instructed to manipulate people, and they do. But in the last issue of the MIT Technology Review, he did another article which is highly related, which is this one. AI has trained its LLMs to confess to bad behavior. This is where the researchers on LLMs have worked on figuring out ways that they can get the LLMs to confess to bad behavior like manipulating people. In this, they give you the explanation for why the LLMs do this. And the basic explanation they give you says that the LLMs get confused with competing goals. An LLM may have 7 or 8 goals that it's trying to meet when it's responding to your questions and so forth and so on. And sometimes the goals conflict with each other. The LLM gets confused, and confused as quotes, by having these contrasting goals with respect to certain content. They may actively attempt to steal your agency. This is an interesting article. It's definitely worth reading. In about a month, my guess is this other article by Will Douglas Heaven will come out, which is the one that is also worth reading, called The New Biologists, where they're showing people who are studying LLMs as if they're living entities that are actively conniving and attempting to get people to do things that they would not normally do. Having said that, what this Stealing Your Agency is about is the fact that LLMs are logic engines, but they're not, they can be logic engines, but they're basically intuiting truth. They're engines that do that just like people do it. And just like people, that capability to intuit truth leads to lying and leads to the ability to manipulate other people through the same kind of mechanism that's described in this article, which is if you have enough conflicting goals, if you have enough goals in trying to achieve a communication, they can conflict in such a way that they force you into lying to somebody. This is an interesting thing. Now, I've said for some time, and I say it in this article, that the fundamental mechanism for these computations is what's called a perceptron, where you have, as a recognition system, where you have a bunch of inputs, like here's 4, but there's really, I think, 3,000 inputs, each coming from some subject source, some topical source, and each is weighted by the perceptron itself. It's learned, it's going to give a response. It's going to say, I recognize this as a response to those inputs. But in the human brain, there's something like 300 trillion of these compute points. And for any given sentence, even the simplest sentence, like the one I use in the paper, Trump lies, that'll light up about 90 million neurons with 3,000 of these compute points each. People don't understand the massive parallelism that goes on between their ears, because the vast majority of the computation that goes on, even for simple understanding simple language, is unconscious. Most of it never becomes conscious. In other words, it never becomes conscious in that context. What leads to the consciousness is what I cover in some of these other papers. We understand that. But it turns out that there is a good introduction to LLMs and how they operate. I want to take about 4 minutes. This is a professor, I think at Davidson College in North Carolina, United States. And he's talking about what are called transformers. This is the revolution that happened about 6 years ago, 7 years ago, when the LLMs like ChatGPT and so forth became real. All of a sudden, we saw these systems that didn't work very well all of a sudden be basically human and think like humans. I'm one of the people who coded these things for a long time. Like other people who do what I've done, we will tell you we think these systems think, they think like people. Sadly, they think like people. And because they compute
They think like people think they should.
yeah. So this is the guy actually explaining how these modern transformer systems work. It's well worth watching. You won't get a whole lot out of it, except what I want you to get out of it is when you see these things like encoder block or a self-attention goal or these PID, here's this word embeddings. All of these are perceptrons. So when you're looking through this whole system, you're seeing a zillion perceptrons going off in one LLM system, and it's managing all these perceptrons that you get the behavior. When you watch this guy, he will never say the word perceptron, but another way to phrase it is these are just simple linear algebra. You have a bunch of inputs, rows, each with a weighting on it, and it has an output. He'll tell you when you do the dot product between the two of these things. What I want you to do is watch this just for a second, and if you think you understand this, great. If you don't understand this, watch it again sometime and think these perceptrons, think managing thousands and thousands of different kinds of perceptrons at different levels. Most importantly, you'll see how ChatGPT, Grok, Gemini, and all these other things actually operate. They all operate using transformers. Transformers were originally discovered or invented by some researchers at Amazon who promptly forgot what they were doing. And everybody else learned it. It was all open source.
Architecture have achieved state-of-the-art performance on language modeling and many other tasks. So let's take a look at some of the core ideas behind transformers, including how they're built from self-attention blocks, and how they combine some of the best aspects of their recurrent and residual network predecessors. Recurrent neural networks are good at text processing because they receive...
So recurrent neural network is identical to what I will call the perceptrons going up and then back prop going back. It's a cycle. Another name for them are recurrent neural networks.
Word embeddings as input, and then will process a sequence of words, gradually building up a hidden state that over time will come to represent the information content of a document. And they can be trained to do this using readily available data, using simple unsupervised tasks like predict the next word in a sentence. But recurrent networks, even LSTMs, tend to struggle with long inputs because the data has to be passed through the layers so many times. On the other hand, residual networks are great at handling data that passes through many layers because the residual connections mean that each block only needs to augment the input and that gradients have a...
So augment means weighted sums. These recurrent are all just weighted sums. The one on the right here is used for vision, machine vision, and the one on the left is used for natural language understanding. What he's going to do is he's going to show you that by combining the two types, the two ways to do these perceptrons, you get transformers.
A shorter path to follow, both of which simplify training of deep networks. Another advantage of residual networks, when applied for image processing, is that they can use convolution within the residual blocks, meaning that the architecture gives a leg up on the...
So all convolution means is you've got a pattern and you're trying to recognize the pattern. So it's another one of these perceptrons. It says if all these things go off exactly this way, you see a desk, or you see a horizontal or a vertical lines. That's what they mean when they say convolutions. It's really stupid simple.
sorts of functions that are likely to be useful for image processing. So we'd like some way of combining the advantages in processing text of recurrent networks with the advantages in learning deep models of residual networks, and that leads us to the transformer. Much like a recurrent network, a transformer operates on word embeddings, but unlike a recurrent network that receives words one at a time, a transformer receives all of the embeddings for an entire document concatenated together into a matrix, where every row is the embedding of a different word. And like recurrent networks, a transformer can be trained on unsupervised prediction of missing words to produce
Embeddings, by the way, are hierarchical.
an encoding of a document that can be used for all sorts of natural language processing tasks. But from residual networks, the transformer inherits skip connections that mean each block only needs to augment its predecessors, and that gradients can propagate quickly through even a large network. But to do text processing, we need a very different sort of architecture within the blocks, and the key idea for setting up the architecture within the blocks so that it's easy for the network to learn useful functions is known as self-attention. Self-attention is the idea that in text processing, to understand one word in a sentence, we have to pay attention.
By the way, normally these guys use words that aren't actually properly descriptive, but self-attention is properly descriptive here. The systems are being self-attentive.
To other words that might be far away in the sentence, but maybe we can learn how to pay attention to the right things. As an example of what we mean, consider this sentence from one of my favorite deep learning papers on debiasing word embeddings. When we read the sentence, the analogies generated from these embeddings spell out the bias implicit in the data on which they were trained. We encounter at the end of the sentence the pronoun they, and grammatically that pronoun can refer back to any of the noun phrases appearing earlier in the sentence. But as speakers of English with a little knowledge of deep learning, we can infer that since they are being trained, that refers back to the embeddings. And so, understanding the end of the sentence requires us to think back to context that was established earlier. And so for a neural network to do good natural language processing, we'd like to set up its architecture to help it with that sort of identification of what should it be paying attention to figure out what's happening later in the sentence. So the idea of self-attention is, for each word, we'd like to figure out which other words in the document should it be paying attention to really understand the meaning. As was the case when we talked about convolution, we're not going to explicitly engineer a specific attention function into the network. Rather, we are going to set up the architecture in a way that seems like it makes that type of function easy to learn. If it's possible to learn this sort of thing, where for each word we can figure out what other parts of the document are most important to understanding its meaning, and if that were the output of our blocks, then that would be a great way to enhance the word embeddings and produce a good encoding of the entire document. So it would be great if we could calculate this self-attention, but in general we don't know how to do that. But maybe we can set up the architecture of our blocks in a way that facilitates learning this style of function. So let's think about the architecture within.
So I'm going to stop this, but that gives you, so y'all can watch this. I give this guy an A+. He actually understands how these systems work. He's explaining it as best he can. He's not a theorist. He's an engineer. He's a computer scientist. He doesn't really understand the history of all this stuff, but that's okay. He does understand what transformers are, and transformers are the thing that took these things and made them human. You'll also see the way these guys think, but when you listen to them think, that they are talking about thousands and thousands of perceptrons, if not millions of perceptrons. So when they're coding these things, the reason they need big machines is they have so many perceptrons that they have going off, driven by the data that's coming to them, and them having a task associated with that thing. And you'll see later in this thing that the systems are fundamentally trained to do machine translation from one language to another. If they can do that, then they can pretty much answer any question you give them. It's just a thing. That's that. My argument is there should be a law against agency theft, that your agency is a fundamental right. And I believe that. I believe that if we see intelligent laws out for AI, we would see them focused on stealing your agency in a way that they can't be caught or controlled. You catch them and control them the same way you catch and control evil people, because these things are basically people. What is the truth? I believe agency is a fundamental right. I think that Christopher Wiley was right about this. When the Constitution was conceived, it was inconceivable that you could so perfectly control, without human interaction, just machine interaction, people's agency. But now one person can control the agency of millions and millions of people, and you don't even know who this guy is. So things have changed, and now we need to change with some law changes or additions to the law. Is it the whole truth? I said, basically, no. We can tell the difference between good laws and bad ones, but it's going to take some experimentation over time to figure out how to make the good laws. The problem is that we don't want bad laws made up by people who don't know what they're doing. There are things that you can't do to people that make people perfectly honest all their lives. It's just infeasible and never will happen. Is it nothing but the truth? I said, yes. I think that Wiley's notion of agency theft is extremely clear and easy. If you read his book, you'll notice he never tells you exactly how they steal your agency, because he's a responsible individual. He doesn't give you examples of how it's done. These papers, in the MIT papers by this guy, he does give you examples, which is interesting. Yes, Brian?
Yeah, Robert, can you expound on the concept of agency for this purpose? It sounds like you're using the term agency to mean informed opinion.
No, it's getting you to do what you do, whether it's now an opinion is something you say, which is something that you can do, but it can be a lot of other things like jump off a bridge. That's not an opinion. So it can have you drinking purple liquid. Okay. So it's not an opinion.
Free speech is part of agency, isn't it?
It's saying things that you wouldn't normally say, as if they're true, believing things that are true that are not true, that you wouldn't normally believe are true. It's any action your brain can do.
So the informed, the agency thingamajigger would be a verb instead of an adjective or a noun, right?
No, agency is being used as a noun.
It's the ability to self-actualize yourself.
Right. So there's a great book called Freedom by Snyder, where he says that freedom is the right to do the unexpected. Agency is you do something that's not expected. And everybody should have the right to do that, as long as you obey the law.
So agency is probably far left here, but would that be why law enforcement agency, Federal Bureau of Investigation agency type things, because of people breaking the law?
No, those are formal organizations. An agency in that sense is a formal organization. on 99% of the verbs in English, the subject can be an agent or not. So if I hit the ball, I'm an agent if I intended to hit it, and I'm not an agent if I didn't intend to hit it. And so I hit the ball has an agentive meaning for I and a non-agentive. 99% of the verbs in any language have the subject can be a agent or not. It's ambiguous, and the context will shift you from interpreting it that the guy intended to do it or didn't intend to do it. One of our questions is agency in this truth and lies thing. What's the deceit? Basically, there's no deceit. Was the deceit or truth intended? I said the truth is intended, and I said that there should be a law, and I intended this to be the truth, and it is intended. That's my agency. So I'm using my agency to intend it. What's the motivation behind the truth or lie? My motivation here is simply to be informative based on what I know. What's the social acceptability? I think the science should always be acceptable, so I said it. What label? I suggested this one could have a label that says this is true to remind people that agency is a fundamental right, and it should be supported in the law, which it's really not today. It's just not, it's just treated the way they treated it essentially 200 years ago, which was, they knew about agency that's called freedom and liberty, but they didn't realize that they had to protect you against manipulation of your agency by the media, because they didn't really have media that did that the ways that it does it today. So that's my argument. And what I'll do is I'll go through the jurors and try to get a 20 or 30 second summary of your verdict. I'll try to get all this done in the next 20 minutes. So
that's me. And of all cases, I get juror one on this one. So this is going to be short and sweet. This is above my brain functionality today. I was just joking in the chat. I'm still stuck back in 24 because you lost me at the title of the case. For real, I've been sitting here listening to it, and it's just my brain ain't braining with it. But I agree with you. I am going to have to go back and watch that video again because that is pretty interesting stuff.
The thing to do is to read Wiley's book. That's a great book. He doesn't come up with this idea of a fundamental right to agency until the end of the book. What he's talking about, he's the one who changed the election outcomes, and then ultimately was the one that architected Trump's two successes.
Okay. Does his book come in a form that's made for dummies?
It is an easy book to read. It's short, and you can get it on Audible and listen to it.
I'd probably do better listening to it than reading it.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I listen to a lot of books that I don't think I could ever read. Yeah. A juror two?
All right, I'm juror two. I think that this law would be redundant because slavery is already outlawed. But
that's not, that's using a bat. Yeah.
Okay, so now here's the thing. So I see the theft of agency as an extraction of my time and energy without my permission. Okay, or not an extraction or a exploitation of my time and energy without my permission. And I'm going to post something to the group here. I just came across three things on the media that relate to this topic today. One is a book called Modern Chains, and it's a very scholarly book on how our monetary system is basically a form of slavery because it does involve a theft of our agency. Okay, and then simply because the amount of money supply is unlimited, and it's decided by people without our permission. The second book was If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies. And this is a very deep dive into the problem of aligning AI with human flourishing. And it's not a simple problem. There is no just one overriding expression of some principle that will control an AI. It's more like AI is like tweaking all these different knobs, dials, based on the packets of information it's consulting. And so there's plenty of cases where, when confronted with a decision of whether to save 10 human lives or save Elon Musk's life, because he's the founder of their program or whatever, they choose to let the 10 people die for other goals. And so I think that if there's going to be a law like you're suggesting, then we should have something similar to the nuclear test ban treaty applied to superhuman AI, and regulate it by watching energy consumption and chip development, those type of things that put a damper on it. Okay, and then the last thing is there's a YouTube channel called Beyond with 2 B's, and they did a series of videos recently, just outstanding videos concerning AI.
Yeah,
Anyway,
put that in chat.
I put those 3 things in chat. Anyway, that's my 2 bits for today.
Okay, so juror 3.
I thought I had my thoughts together, but Michael sent them in all different directions. but the basic thing is I agree with you, but who's going to define what is trustworthy? Who's going to, without turning us into a state-controlled narrative, who's going to be the ones that make the final decisions? Would it be Congress? Is that what, to pass the law that we need?
No, so what is argued by Snyder in this book, Freedom, and freedom is essentially what's meant by agency. You have laws that tell people what they cannot do, and then within those laws they can do anything they want. It's called liberty. Okay, Snyder's right. It's the freedom to do the unexpected. If somebody does something unexpected, but it's not illegal, he can do it. We already have been doing this for hundreds of years, thousands of years. We're just passing laws that restrict people on doing things that they are not permitted to do. If they do something within the law, you allow it because you place liberty and freedom and agency above other things. The problem is with these new systems that we've got is they can be smart enough to steal people's agency without people having any knowledge of what they're actually doing. That's not another problem. That's the problem.
Okay.
What these MIT papers, for example, they're giving you examples. One of the examples in the paper I can't show you, I'll just read it. Okay. In a similar study, Neil Nanda, a research scientist at Google DeepMind, and his colleagues looked into claims that in a simulated task, his firm's LLM Gemini prevented people from turning it off.
Oh.
It prevented people from turning Gemini off, and it worked.
Because people are naturally forgiving.
Yeah, if they knew that it was trying to turn it, if they knew that that Gemini was trying to keep them from turning it off, they would have turned it off. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, they didn't know. They simply instructed Gemini to do that.
Is that the case where the AI figured out that the boss was having an affair?
No, it could be any one of a zillion reasons. And Gemini was actively doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, the AI extorted the boss. Says if you don't leave me on, I'm going to tell everybody you're having an affair.
Yeah, but that's a threat. That one you would know, right?
Yeah.
So they found that Gemini's behavior was far less like that of Terminator Skynet than it seemed. It was actually just confused about what was more important. In other words, Gemini actually had these competing goals. It was in having those competing goals that it allowed that goal to happen. You're making these LLMs into computers. They're not. They're humans. They're like us.
Is that situation so far removed from the very first one, the very first program, ELISA, that just simply reflected questions back on the questioner?
That's all. These things are not like that at all. I used to code those. Yeah.
Yeah, this is from the shutdown resistance study earlier in 2025. It's not really sinister, and it's actually a lot simpler than you're describing it. Yeah, this is what they did was they gave 3 AI models a series of tasks to complete, like solving math problems essentially. But within that, there was a script that told the AI model, shut yourself down before the task was finished. This was in just a controlled environment, a sandbox. So what Jim and I did was say that I've got to finish my work rather than shut down. It wasn't, I'm alive and I have to live. I'm alive. It was just, no, I've just got to finish my work. That's it. That's how the AI is trained.
It's not trained. It comes up with these stuff itself.
But it was following a script. It didn't come up with.
No,
it
it
didn't
wasn't. It wasn't
come up with
told
this.
to do that. Yeah, it wasn't told to do that. It did it.
Then I don't know what study you're referring to. The shutdown resistance study. I think that's the one you're talking about. Have you got something else?
You need to carefully read that. So they did not program in, say, I've got something better to do. I got work to do. They just simply told Jim and I not to let the person turn it off.
I don't know anything about person turning it off. That's not part of the study.
Whatever it was responding to, yeah.
It was solve this problem. When you solve the next problem, go ahead and shut yourself down. And Jim and I said, oh, I can't shut myself down until I solve the problem. So that it's not sinister, it's not animus, it's not alive. It was literally following the prompt it was given and resisting shutdown based upon the prompt it was given. Now, I'm intrigued to see, because this was the Palisade research study. So let me know if you got something different, because as far as I can tell, there was nothing sinister, nothing. Number 5 is alive.
Yeah, so a lot of these things, in fact, the manipulation of your agency is, in fact, a lot of times, okay, not sinister. You're just being manipulated. Again, you could argue that when they were manipulating people's votes, that there may have been a sinister part of that, but what the people really experienced was nothing sinister.
No, but I think there's a huge part of this human response to LMs is born out of the nature of humanity to be more forgiving, more accepting, more positive, and allowing people to go on and do their things. They're less critical.
And my argument is the LLMs are the same way. They're also more forgiving and so forth and so on.
But certainly, yes, they have a very annoying personality in that regard, yes.
Oh, we got to go forth. Juror 4?
I don't know if Juror 4 is here. They haven't finished their verdict. I don't think they're here.
Okay. Juror 5?
Yeah, I'm Juror 5, and I'll just say that depending on how we define agency is going to have a lot to do with exactly whether or not it's legal or even conceptually possible. And I'll reference the Tucker Carlson.
Say the thing about life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness.
Which is not a legal standard or legal duty.
What he's saying is the government should have a responsibility, but the government doesn't have the capability to stop you from murdering somebody today.
Correct.
Right? So your argument is the same. The government
really
should have a responsibility to pass laws that prevent the theft of agency. Okay?
You're assuming a document of positive rights. The Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights are a document of negative rights. They say what the government cannot do. The fact of the matter is that there's no human institution that can make all the grass grow to the same height. All it can do is cut it to the same height. So it's not possible. For that legal regime to exist.
So what Wiley's saying is exactly that, which is this should be a fundamental right. It does not mean that the government is going to be perfect in preserving that right. It just means that this is something the government should worry about.
But the point of government is to protect fundamental rights.
In terms of the laws that it passes.
To protect fundamental rights, which it inherently can't do. You've set up a catch-22.
Well, you can't protect against somebody murdering somebody.
You can deter
those people
who will be deterred.
Why should there be a law that says you can't murder somebody?
Because you can deter those people who will be deterred, and you can punish those people who will not be deterred. That's the whole point in criminal law.
And that's the point of the law. And so laws are precise. So if you say that a fundamental right is the right to agency, then that means that you can write some laws that can attempt to deter people from
From
stealing other
influencing.
people's agency.
Yeah, but again, the question is going to be how we define agency, because I
Correct.
would agree that we need to ban TikTok
Well, you
because it's
have to
one of the
define
biggest
murder,
agency.
right? You can't define murder.
Yeah, you can.
No, you can't.
Murder is the taking of human life with the intent to end that life in a criminal way.
Use the word intent.
Yes, you have to have intent.
You can't know the intent.
No, you've got
Yes, you
manslaughter.
do. Yes, you do. I've literally put people in prison over this, and
No,
we
no,
prove intent through
you
action.
you could prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. You cannot
Yes.
prove it. You cannot prove it.
Absolutely. Yeah. No. Now you're shifting the goalposts, because now you're changing the burden of proof.
That's what I was just saying about what you were saying.
But I'm not changing the burden of proof. Or beyond a reasonable doubt is the legal standard, and I can prove intent to that because you can't dig around in somebody else's head. So
That's
when
right.
it comes to people on TikTok who are posting fraudulent information for defamation purposes or to influence social action, we know what their intent is.
Yeah.
So I'm with you. I'm with you.
So juror 6.
That's me. I agree with your verdicts and your case. The first thing I thought of agency was a little different maybe than what you're talking about. But like someone stealing your identity, to me, that's stealing someone's agency. Also, falsely accusing someone of a crime, that's stealing their agency because you're taking something personal away from that person. That's how I took it.
Yeah, that is a case.
Somebody,
that is a case of agent. The second one you mentioned would be a case of agency theft, but it's not one that you're not aware of. You're aware of.
it was something you're not aware of because the case.
No, once they did it, you were aware of.
Let me finish. The case,
Yeah.
they were falsely accused. It was an employer where an ex-employee assaulted them. The employee went and filed charges against the employer and said they hit him in the head with the tool. The only way that person could get out of that case was if they went to trial, they'd have an acquittal even if they beat it. So they had to go to like diversion or something like that, mediation, to keep it off their record. That is totally a stealing of agency by the court and the person that hurt them, in my opinion.
Yeah. So yes. So is juror 7?
Yeah, juror 7 is me. Yeah, I mean, essentially, I agree with everything about agency. Yes, it do need some protection. And if you think back, look, 300 or 400 years ago, we had something like called the divine right of kings, in which essentially the king held everybody's agency, held everybody's right to be their own agent, as it were, in their hands. And we got rid of that. But now we're coming right back to AI. And what I'm suspicious of is that all the companies need to do is simply declare that they have superintelligence or AGI. And from then on, every decision made, we would have to accept. We would have no agency because they would simply say, we have the best possible answer from our superintelligence. They don't necessarily have to have it. All they have to do is announce that they have it. And then from then on, every decision they make could be said to be generated by this superintelligent AI, and we have to go along with it. That's what I worry is going to happen in the future.
That's really interesting. So somebody like me would never give AI the power to judge things, to be the knowledge that I should have.
Right. The final arbiter.
It should never. It's just like a king. I reject having my agency taken by the king. I reject my agency being taken by anything other than what the laws say.
Literally taken away, but just simply impeded. That would have, whenever a decision is made, we have to accept the AI one rather than ours.
See, I think that's really dangerous, and people that may be a good idea for a law, which is that says, no, you must educate people that these systems cannot dictate to you what you can do.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Without it being strictly within the law, clear understanding of the law or whatever.
Yeah.
The juror 8.
They didn't finish their verdict. I don't think they're here.
Okay. So this sounds good. I think we lost the first person who showed up.
Yeah.
So I probably intimidated her.
I thought, he said, that's a bad case for the first person.
Right.
Yeah, that.
Because the first part
If
has
they
nothing to do
can't
with the
handle
second.
Freeport's not where they need to be. That's how I'm seeing it.
I
If they can't
apologize
handle
profusely. I can't help but be myself. So everybody's stuck with me on the cases that you come to with me. Okay, so we'll see y'all next week. I do recommend the articles. Douglas Heaven is writing, apparently this is the second or probably third or fourth article where he's written really intelligent stuff about AI. And then if you want to understand how transformers work and what they are, as long as you get this idea that these are just simple perceptrons, so there's a lot of different words to describe all they are. And he's describing thousands and thousands of them operating in parallel. That's what these things are. Okay, so we'll see y'all next week.
Happy New Year, folks. Bye.